Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Baumhauer's Victory Grill as we get set for tonight's edition of the Nick Saban Show, getting set for the Saturday meeting with the Aggies of Texas A&M. The coach is alongside. Good to see you, sir. How are you?
Doing good. How are you?
I am well, thank you. And you know Brett Hudson, of course.
Hey, Brett, glad to have you here, man.
Thanks for having me, Coach.
So how's things? You have a decent week so far? Everybody relatively healthy on the practice field?
Well, you know, I think when you have a bye week, you put guys into one of three categories. You know, guys either improve,
right?
They stay stagnant, do what they have to do to get by, and then you have some guys who backslide, who just can't stay focused. And, you know, I think that we have a lot of people now that are addicted to motivation.
Interesting.
I mean, so to just go practice for a week just because you want to get better, they don't understand that concept. All right? They have to have somebody dogging them. They have to have some challenge from the media. They have to have somebody say something bad about them on the internet. I mean, there's got to be some external factor.
They just won't do it.
That makes them want to go. So, but I think a lot of that comes with maturity. I think a lot of that comes with players who have experience and understand the challenges that are, you know, ahead for them in terms of the competition and the better teams that, you know, we're going to play starting this week. So, you know, it's just how do you have the maturity to stay focused? And where does that maturity come from? It really comes from, you know, what kind of discipline do you have? And, you know, sometimes I told the players this week, I said, look, I said, you guys all think you get discipline on the field. You don't get discipline on the field. You get discipline when you get up in the morning. You know, because you're either a disciplined person or you're not. So do you get strength on the field or do you get strength in the weight room and then you use it on the field?
Exactly.
All right, so if you make the right choices and decisions and be a disciplined person, when you get up in the morning and do everything right all day, you go on the field and be a better player because you already have discipline. It becomes a habit, and that becomes who you are. So kind of an interesting, you know, way that we try to get these guys to stay focused.
When did that start changing? I mean, it wasn't that way when you were college age, when I was college age. We're a couple of years apart. But when did you see this starting to change?
I think it changed with the information, you know, network changing. You know, the internet, people communicate more, people get a lot more things thrown at them. So, you know, things don't become internal anymore, they become external. You know, there's always something out here that you're hearing, listening, and responding to rather than just making a decision that I want to do this, and this is what I have to do to go do it, and I'm going to get committed to doing all those things the right way. So I think it all started to change with that. You probably know more about when that all changed because I don't do any of that stuff.
Hey, I'm not on social media either. I'm no Facebook, no Twitter, nothing. I guess I'm old school, but there's nothing wrong with that either.
That's two of us, but I'm sure this young buck here is on it.
Yeah, I'm sure Brett is. Brett's all over that kind of stuff.
Y'all are living better lives not being on it. I envy the both of you.
Well, with that said, welcome to the show, sir. And you have the first question from the media for the coach.
Ooh, the honors.
Yes, sir.
Wanted to pick your brain on kind of that motivation that you mentioned going into the open week and how you keep players motivated when there isn't that motivation out there through social media or whatever. Do you anticipate, with this being a year where you've got 2 open weeks in the regular season, do you anticipate having a better open week the second time because you went through it this first time? Or how do you think approaching that second open week is different because you've had one earlier in the year?
I don't think there's a lot of difference. I think what we try to do is we try to really give the players a sense of purpose even when we have a bye week. You know, kind of understanding that they're used to playing games, they're used to having a challenge presented to them, and now they don't. So you try to present a challenge to them each day in terms of, you know, we make sort of an individual you know, these are the things you need to improve on for each individual on the team. So kind of a quality control individually, collectively as a group, collectively on offense, defense, and special teams. So they have sort of a sense of purpose and you're not just going out there to practice. And I think that helps. Every day, we never go on the field where we don't present something that the players are going to see in the future in terms of a future opponent. So we might say we're working on, Arkansas, Tennessee, whatever today. So we haven't been working on just Texas A&M for 2 weeks because the players would get bored with that. So we're giving them a challenge every day, mentally and hopefully physically, to be able to get better. And then we do a little more practicing good on good, when we're in these situations. So it gives the players an opportunity to compete against a better player. So hopefully that motivates them to try to want to get better. But I think that is the real challenge, though, is, people get, and I used the term before, addicted to motivation, somebody motivating them all the time. But when you talk to somebody like Kobe Bryant or some of the great players that we've had and people that we've had that come and talk to the players, the one thing that sticks out that's very different about them, they are very self-motivated. I mean, they know what they want to accomplish. They work hard to do it. They're very committed to it. They don't need anything else or anybody else to sort of affect, how they go about what they do. And the more players you have like that on your team, obviously, the better off you're going to be.
Coach, time for our first phone call of the night, brought to us by Alabama 811. Remember, folks, always contact 811 before you dig to know what's below. Call 811 or online, go to al811.com. And, of course, Pee Wee has the honors tonight from down in Grand Bay, Alabama. Hello, Pee Wee. Welcome in.
Hello.
Pee Wee, how are you doing, buddy?
We're doing good, Coach. We're enjoying this little bit of cooler weather that we got coming in.
Yeah, we enjoyed it this week, too, man.
Amen.
It's been really hot practicing, so it was better this week.
Good deal. Coach, I was wondering, with the issues that Chris Owens is facing medically or physically rather, and us having to probably start a different center this weekend, going into a very hostile and loud environment like Texas A&M, how much more do you work on the guys just trying to have their timing and all that together?
Right. Well, we always work on, anytime we play on the road, and it makes for a little bit more of a sloppy practice sometimes. But this week we did it on Wednesday and Thursday. We always usually at least do it one day a week, where we have really loud noise at practice. So, and it's primarily for the offense, when we play on the road. So you have to decide, what is our cadence going to be? Are we going to use silent count? Are we going to have the guard tap the center and use silent count? Are we going to still try to hand clap? Sometimes you can't hear the hand clap. So, you want to do everything you can to not allow the noise to affect the game. You'd like to see the players be able to stay focused in that little green patch that we're going to play on that's 53 yards wide and 100 yards deep. That kind of gets decided there by who can sort of impose their will and be able to stay focused and do what they have to do and not let the noise affect them. It's difficult to do that in practice, but we've done it 2 days this week, and I think that Landon will do fine with it. I mean, Chris has done a good job for us, but Landon has played center before in some games, and he seems to be a bright guy, can make all the calls, and we haven't had much of an issue with it this week in practice.
And we saw Deontay return after his suspension was over, and I guess that gives you some more options, if you will, having him available now.
Well, he's going to play right guard.
Right.
Landon will play center, and then everybody else is really the same. But, you have to practice all the time with these internal guys alternating their positions. It's the only way that you can get the best 5 players, on the field when you do have something happen to a particular person. So having Deontay back is really good, and he's practiced and played pretty well. Yeah.
Coach, we have a visitor right here to your right with a question at Baumhower's. Good evening, sir.
Evening, Coach Saban. I had a question. Just get away from the football questions for a second. If you had never gotten into football, do you think there's another sport you might have played or coached?
Yeah, I liked them all. When I was coming up, I think I told this story before, but my grandma Saban made us all learn how to play the accordion, which I hated. I absolutely hated it. And I was the only boy, so all the girls, they liked it. My sister, my aunt, everybody liked it. I hated it. So I figured out when I was 9 years old that the only way that I could get out of practice on accordion was to play a sport. Because if I said I had to go to practice or I was going to go practice, it didn't matter if it was baseball, basketball, it didn't matter. She would let me out of it. So that's how I got out of playing accordion. I just went and practiced whatever I could practice. So I played whatever you could play just to get out of that.
You would have been a hit at the polka parties, though.
Wow. We had enough polka party players. But anyway, so I loved all the sports because I loved to compete, and I still liked. I even played tennis. I love playing golf. Not very good, but I like playing because I like the competition. And I think there's a lot of lessons that you can learn in competition, how to overcome adversity and the work that you have to do to try to get better at things. I told a player today that seemed to be struggling a little bit with his confidence, and he's kind of down about how he was playing. And, I said to him, you look like you're kind of down, but people that I know that are down and depressed, they're thinking about what happened in the past. And then you're very anxious on the field because you're worried about what's going to happen in the future. How about just focusing on what's in front of you right now, this play right here? Because the things that happened in the past are great learning opportunities for you so that you can do better now. So let's don't dwell negatively on those things. The only way you're going to affect the things that happen in the future is to get it right now. So focus on what's happening now. So learn from your lessons of the past, focus on what's happening now, and that will take care of the future for you. So I think one of the biggest difficulties that players have and people have is how do you deal with failings? And to me, the number one thing is if you're going to be successful, the people who are successful deal with their failings better than the other folks. And I always use the example, Ty Cobb. You probably don't know who Ty Cobb is. He's the greatest baseball player that ever played. Played back in the early 1900s. He's got the all-time leading batting average for his career. And he played like 20 years. Mm-hmm. So it's not like he played a couple years. He played for a long time. So he's got the all-time greatest batting average in the history of baseball. And he failed 63% of the time. He batted .327. Is that right? 333 or something.
Yeah.
337, something like that. Okay? But he failed 63% of the time. So how he actually handled his failings is what helped him be successful. So if you don't use those things to your advantage, even when bad things happen, it's going to affect how successful you can be in the future. And that's a constant sort of thing that we have to try to get our players to be able to, because they're so outcome oriented, and outcomes are really distractions. You have to be focused on what do I have to do to get the outcome. So I forget what your question is, but I hope I answered it.
Wanting to know what sport you would have played or been part of. You always use a lot of boxing analogies. Did you follow Golden Glove boxing, pro boxing as a kid growing up? Did you and your dad watch some bouts on TV and so on?
Well, when I was a kid, a heavyweight boxing championship fight was like
they were big.
The biggest thing that was happening in the century.
Sure.
Now, I can remember when I was probably, I don't even know what year this was, but I was probably maybe in the 7th grade, maybe in the 8th grade, I don't know, maybe not even that old. But Muhammad Ali, who was Cassius Clay then, right, fought Sonny Liston.
Right.
And I'm telling you, it wasn't on TV. And I remember my dad had a 1960 red Pontiac. And there was 50 people with all the doors open listening to the damn fight on the radio. Mm-hmm. I mean, you couldn't get 50 people interested in this. If there was a championship fight on right now, you couldn't get them interested in watching on TV. And everybody around was there to listen to that. And I think that we all did that, though. That was a big thing.
1964 and 1965, they met twice. But you're right, boxing in those days, it was the hugest event going.
Big.
It was, but the world changes. The world changes. Why don't you ask the coach a question?
Well, we were off of football earlier, so I'll stay in that vein. My wife and I are expecting twins this spring. Yeah,
Congratulations.
Thank you, our first. And I want to know the Nick Saban process of parenting. I'm basically asking for parenting advice here. We know that your process for football is based on commitment, toughness, effort, discipline, those things. What's the Nick Saban process for parenting? Help me parent these children.
Well, I think the most difficult thing about parenting is, the conflict always exists between making your children do what's right and making them happy. I mean, you really want to make them happy. You want them to have better things than what you had when you were coming up. All right? But at the same time, I think it's important that you sort of make them do right in terms of the choices and decisions that are going to help them be more successful in life. Because I think as parents, the ultimate goal that we always want is, we want our kids to be happy, but we also want them to grow up and be successful. All right? Not from our perspective, but from their perspective, so they can be happier, more self-fulfilled, and all that kind of stuff. So I can't tell you how to do that, but it's the balance that you're always trying to create, and sometimes maybe it's good that one of the parents is very compassionate and always trying to help the kids be happy, and somebody else has to be a little bit the bad cop and sort of be the enforcer of trying to get them to do things the right way. So you just can't really tolerate, allowing your children to do things that are not going to help them, create the right habits to be successful in the future. No different than if you're coaching a player or anybody else. But it's just so much more important when it's your own children.
So Miss Terry was the good cop to your bad cop. Is that the vibe I'm picking up, Miss Terry?
I'm not going down that road. I mean, I can't win there.
Hey, Coach, we got a very interesting question from the Nick Saban Show blog at AL.com. Cynthia in Huntsville, Alabama, says, Coach, I've noticed that many starting quarterbacks aren't usually used as holders on kicks. Many times it's the punter or someone else. What is your strategy or philosophy on using a starting quarterback as a holder? Thank you, and roll tide.
Well, first of all, we want the guy that's the best holder on our team to be the holder.
Gotcha.
Who has the best hands, who can get the ball down quickest and spin the ball so the kicker doesn't kick the laces. And when I was a player, which I know nobody really cares about that old-fashioned stuff, if you were the quarterback, you were the holder. That's the way it was.
Gotcha.
You learned how to do that when you were a kid, and that's what you did. Well, it just happens to be that Tua is really good at this. AJ did it when he was here too. Now, it does enhance your chances of being able to fake the ball because you have someone athletic enough to run, and you also have someone
with the
arm talent to throw passes if you want to do that. So I could never understand. Now, I do understand how this whole thing sort of transpired through the years, that punters and other position players started to become the holder because they had the practice time that they could commit when the other folks were practicing 7-on-7 or team run or whatever it was. When the quarterback's doing that, the punter is over there holding for the kicker.
Gotcha.
So they could sort of get used to each other and all that. And I think as long as you have a punter that has a really good hands, that's good. And we've had, guys do that here before that could do it. And we are training other people to do it. We're training Mac to do it. Slade Bolden, who was a high school quarterback, he can do it. So we're not making Tua do it just because, and a little bit of it is up to the kicker. What is the kicker's preference? When the kicker says, I really like this guy as a holder.
The way he puts the ball down, the angle, whatever.
Yeah, that enhances his confidence of being competent. So, you want to listen to that. So, anyway, that's kind of the history behind all that. But, and I don't have a preference. I just want the best guy on our team holding. I mean, you certainly don't want to muff a snap in a critical game and lose points over it because you didn't have the best guy in there holding.
another guest right here at the restaurant, Coach, standing to your right with a question. Good evening, sir.
Hey, Coach. I was just wondering, facing Jimbo Fisher and his offensive mind, what are some of the difficult aspects going into that? And, I guess just how was, having the extra week help prepare y'all for that?
Right. Well, first of all, to answer the first part of your question, Jimbo is a very, very good offensive coach. He's always had really good pass concepts, and he's a really, really good quarterback coach. All right, so his quarterback is always really well schooled on, all right, here's what the defense does, here's how I'm going to read these coverages, here's the best patterns to work against this, and I'm going to throw the ball to the right place. All right, so he does a really, really good job, in that regard. He's also, committed to toughness. He's committed to running the ball. All right, so a lot of guys that are really good passing coaches, they just want to pass all the time. All right, but he's not really like that. I mean, he's got the mentality of, I want to play with toughness. I want to control the line of scrimmage. We're going to try to run the ball. We're going to try to have balance. So that makes it even more difficult because they're not one-dimensional. So I have a tremendous amount of respect for Jimbo. I mean, he was one of the best offensive coordinators we ever had, and he was, a young coach, then. He was only 31 years old or something when we hired him at LSU, and he was one of the best play callers on game day, had a great feel for the game. Sometimes guys are really good offensive coordinators because they're really well organized. They help other people be organized. They have a good system. They got a good scheme. But when the game comes, they're not great play callers, And then some guys are not very organized. You need somebody else to work that part of it. But when the game comes, they have a great feel for, what am I going to call in this situation and what's going to work because of what the other team is doing. And Jimbo does a really good job of that too. So it's always really challenging. To answer the second part of your question, I think with our team, especially on defense, for us to have more time to get ready for a game is very helpful to us, because the more reps that we can get with young players, which we have several young players, especially playing in the front seven, that really helps their chances of maybe making less mental errors in the game. So I think it now, if we go play bad, I guess that's not a very good answer. But from a preparation standpoint, I feel a little bit better when our guys can get more reps and we can expose them to more things, because you really can't coach experience, so you're trying to increase their knowledge, and you can do that if you can practice longer.
Isn't it interesting? I know Youngstown, Ohio has this, a great coaching community. You from West Virginia, yourself, Jimbo, Rich Rodriguez, and I'm sure I'm leaving folks out. Isn't it something how a small state like West Virginia has produced so many top-rate coaches? It's just an interesting deal how that happens, I guess.
John McKay was from 6 miles from where I grew up.
Oh, okay.
And Rick Trickett, who was never really a head coach, was one of the best offensive line coaches, is also from, we're all in the same area. We all grew up, sort of playing against each other and all that.
Just very interesting the way that worked out. On the phone, we've got Jay joining us from Hayden, Alabama. Hello, Jay. Welcome in.
Hey, good evening, y'all.
Hi, Jay.
Coach, would like to really thank you and Miss Terry for coming and saving the University of Alabama. First of all, because no telling where Alabama would be without you guys.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, but we got a lot of very good people and positive resources that I think we'll be able to figure it out. And I hope continue to do that regardless.
All right, my question, I would like how the NFL has the extra point moved back. To me, I would love to put some kind of strategic into the extra point instead of it just mainly almost being automatic. I just want to get your idea on if you would like to see the extra point move back to the where the NFL kicks it now.
Well, Jay, I hate to say this, but our extra points haven't been so automatic the last couple of years. So, I'm standing there on the sideline shaking my leg every time we line up. So if you moved it back to the 25-yard line, I'd really be having, that anxiety that I tried to tell you that it's not good. I have sometimes. So, but I do think that from a competitive standpoint, It creates a little more interest because, you know, people wouldn't make 95 or 98% of whatever the kicks are that they make now, you know, from the 3-yard line. It probably would be a much bigger advantage to have, you know, a really, really good kicker. So, you know, but I after coaching 8 years in the NFL, I always favored, and I know people in the NCAA will hate me saying this, but I really liked the overtime rules that we had in the NFL better than just putting the ball on the 25-yard line. Because you just keep playing the game. You know, you play the game until, you know, now they have a time limit on it. It used to be you just played until somebody won.
Would you have wanted to see both teams get the ball?
Yeah, well, that's the rule.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, it used to be if the team that had the ball scored a touchdown,
the other
tough
team
on the other team. Yeah.
Right. Well, you know, I'm just saying that's not the question I got asked, but I always kind of liked it better because, you know, playing in the red zone, if you can be a tremendous advantage to some teams. Mm-hmm. You know, if they have certain types of players, and you know, you hear people going for 2 to try to win the game, which, you know, I think is fine. I'm not, you know, like criticizing anybody for doing that, but they do it because they don't have enough confidence in their defense, or their defense is tired because they played so many plays. So they really affected the outcome of the game just because of the way the rules are.
Brett, now that the coach has rejoined us, why don't you jump in with another question, sir?
I want to piggyback off the question our visitor asked earlier about Texas A&M's offense and how Jimbo does things. He puts a lot on the plate of his quarterback mentally with the checks and things that he's responsible for. How does one scout the mental capacity of a quarterback in recruiting? Is it possible? And if it is possible, how do you scout the mental capacity of a quarterback?
Well, I think that's probably one of the most difficult things, and I think that's probably one of the things that makes the quarterback position, you know, like if you look at it in the draft, you know, what is the most difficult, what is the number one failure position of first-round draft picks? And then why does Tom Brady get drafted in the 6th round, and some guy that was the first pick in the draft doesn't end up being a good quarterback, and he ends up being an all-time Hall of Fame guy? And I think a lot of it is you know, quarterback is all about decision-making, judgment, timing, being able to do things really fast in terms of recognition, and then really being accurate. All right, so we evaluate all these things that, you know, I remember when I was recruiting and Bernie Kosar was in Youngstown and he was in high school, and, you know, he had that sort of not so unique, kind of a unique throwing motion that wasn't really kind of normal, kind of sidearm. You know, he wasn't the most athletic guy in the world when it came to movement, running, fast, speed, all that. And, you know, nobody recruited him. Miami was the one school that really recruited him and saw something. And it was interesting because I coached with a guy that was on Miami staff later on at the Houston Oilers, Kim Helton. And he said, well, the reason we recruited him is, you know, we sort of covered our eyes and just watched where the ball went, and the ball went there fast and it went there accurately. And then when I was coaching at the Cleveland Browns, we had to play him or I was coaching at the Houston Oilers, we had to play against him all the time, and he was really, really good. All right, now, I think, at Ohio State at the time and looked at him and said, you know, I don't think this guy will be very good. All right, so I think this is only the point of how that we try to evaluate physical skills to play the position, arm strength, athletic ability, quick feet, all these things that, but really what it comes down to is what kind of judgment, decision-making, instincts, accuracy, you know, those things are much more important. So that's why I think it's the most difficult thing to sort of evaluate in a quarterback, because some of these things are innate and you don't really know what they are until you get a guy. So that makes it really, really difficult. I mean, I remember Aaron Rodgers coming out. We were in Miami. We could have picked him in the draft. He got picked 24th in the draft, and we picked 16th. And, you know, we just, because of And really one of the biggest reasons is everybody was afraid of his size.
Yeah.
Because he was like barely 6'2".
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, give me a break. Yeah, Drew Brees too.
Sure.
He's a little over 6 foot.
Well, in those days, the Donovan McNabb bodies were the things in that time. Coach, you got another interesting, this show and our games are heard all around the world now with the internet and with satellite radio, and we've got military folks sending us notes all the time and Bama fans from everywhere. A question that came into the Nick Saban Show blog on AL.com from Linda in Armidale, Australia.
Wow.
And she says, Coach, greetings from down under. During your career, have you ever recruited or have a team member, a punter in particular, from Australia?
Well, Jesse Williams was from Australia.
Exactly.
And, we have worked out some punters. Mm-hmm. And there are several very, very good punters in the NCAA right now that are Australian.
Right.
Jesse Williams, the recruiting story behind Jesse Williams is one of the all-time greats for me. I mean, I tell this all the time.
Sure.
Arthur was Jesse's dad, so I would have to call at like 6 o'clock in the morning and it'd be like 11 o'clock at night there. Or whatever, or I'd call them at night and they'd be in their pajamas, just getting up in the morning.
Right.
All right, so, and the only way I could communicate is we'd do this FaceTime stuff.
Okay.
And, Jesse only played like a year or so of football in Australia. Then he came to Arizona Western Junior College and played 2 years. And in 2 years, he was the #1 defensive lineman in the country. He's like 6'5", 315 pounds, and can run 4.6. And he was a rugby player. And incidentally, they made me, I'm an honorary member of the Aborigines National Rugby Team in Australia, just for this lady to know. And I have my jersey hanging in the closet at home. But anyway, Arthur and his wife never, ever been to America, never knew anything about American college, never knew anything about American football. They didn't know what training table was. They didn't know what study table was. They didn't know anything about it. So all I kept doing was doing these video conferences with them, and I would keep talking to them, and I was trying to talk them into coming on a visit.
Sure.
Because I knew I was going to have to take a home visit out there, which was going to be about a 20-hour flight at some point in time. So one day I call, and Arthur says, Jesse's dad, he says, I know where I want Jesse to go. And my heart just sunk. I mean, it just sunk like we lost this guy. Because, I'd never been there. They'd never been here. Sure. They never saw Alabama. They'd never visited American college. And I said, well, what did you decide, Arthur? And he said, well, I want him to come to Alabama. And I said, well, how did you come to that? And he says, well, there's 25 schools calling here. And the only team they ever talk about is Alabama. So from my standpoint,
might as well go to Alabama.
You all must be the best.
There you go.
That's where I want my son to go. And that was it. That was the end of it. We got the best defensive lineman in recruiting only because everybody else helped us out by talking bad about us.
That's great. I'm trying to remember who it was. One of our linemen years ago said, everywhere I went for recruiting, they said, we want you to come here because we want you to beat Alabama. Same basic idea. And finally the kid said, well, heck, I might as well go to Alabama. Every one of their games, obviously, is a big game, and it worked out. Coach, a visitor right here with a Mercedes-Benz shirt on.
That's good.
Welcome in, sir.
Good evening, Coach. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Coach, on the defensive side of the ball, when the calls are made, whether it's cover 3, cover 2, zone, or man-to-man, what are the tendencies on the opposing team you look for that drives some of these calls on the defense? Or is it the position on the field? Is it the player matchups? What are these in-game adjustments that really drive these calls?
Yeah, you must be an engineer, right?
This is what I love for. Football and work are the only two things.
Yeah, there you go. Well, that's a very good question. Well, I think it's a combination of things, and I think, first of all, you take formation and formation tendencies. An example, probably the most common formation in football now is 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end, and 1 back. I mean, that's the spread, and that's what most people run the spread out of. Okay, so the tight end can be in 3 different positions. He can be off the ball in the core, he can be on the ball in the core, and he can be flexed out. So if you take just those 3 categories and you would say, okay, what is their run pass relative to where the back is? What runs do they run when the back is to the tight end? What runs do they run when the tight end is the back is away from the tight end? And that's how you sort of start coaching your players. All right, so if they have a huge run tendency, then you want to play certain types of coverages, in those situations. And if you want to play middle of the field coverage, you either can play with 3 deep zone, whether you rotate weak or strong, or you can play man free, whether you rotate weak or strong. All right, so that gives you an extra guy in the box, but it also puts the people on the outside in sort of one-on-one coverage. So, and RPOs were really built to kill middle of the field coverage. All right, so unless your cats are better than their cats, all right, which means that's the way when you play man-to-man, your cats better be in their cat better than their cats because you're playing cat coverage, and that's what's got to happen. So if you play split safeties, you can take away the RPOs. Now you got one less guy in the box. All right, so the front has to be able to handle it, but you can take care of the RPOs, and you don't put as much pressure on the people outside. So we're going to take every one of those scenarios and say, what did the people do in these formations, these receiver locations? So me personally, we don't play a whole lot of man-to-man that's truly man-to-man middle of the field coverage until we have to play deny the ball. So what's deny the ball? If it's 3rd down and 4, 5, 6, maybe even 7, you got to deny the ball. It's like basketball. You got to deny the ball because if they catch it, they're going to make a 1st down. Beyond that, you can play zone, or you can play what I call pattern match man, which means you match the man after the pattern distribution. So if you play that way, you can stop RPOs, you can deny the ball, and you don't put as many people in one-on-one situations, which we do a lot of that. But now, when we do that, you got no control of who ends up covering Jerry Rice. Okay, so if he runs inside and becomes the final 3, the linebacker might have him. So you're going to say, fire the coach. So you kind of try to do a combination of both of those things, all right, to not put so much pressure on your players and also to be able to take away what they do, particularly run and pass. Some people have a huge tendency, if you look outside and you see the receivers and the first receiver's on the ball and the second receiver's off the ball, they run certain routes. Put the first receiver off the ball and the second receiver on the ball, they run certain routes. Well, maybe there's a coverage combination when they have 2 guys out there in those positions that you would rather play. When they get in stack positions, all right, there's probably 8 ways to play stack positions. Some may be better against some routes than others. So which way do you want to play? All right, so those are the kind of choices and decisions you make. You just don't say, okay, this is how we're playing and we're going to go out there and we're going to make it work, all right, because you're going to put your players in a lot of bad situations. All right, but the players also then, if you do it that way, they have to be able to recognize, when to do what. And when we have inexperienced players at certain positions, that is a little bit harder to do. So we have to try to be a little simpler. Did I answer that?
You sure did.
Okay.
And Coach,
so I'm going to ask you the difference. What's the difference between an AMG and a regular V8? I mean, because that's about how hard the question you asked me was.
AMGs start from your 43s that you see, which is actually less than the V8s, so, or horsepower-wise. So I know as you go up, now you have the 65S AMG, which is...
That's what I like.
Yes, I'm sure.
And folks, we have just a few seconds, Coach, for your final word, presented by Mercedes-Benz, the best or nothing.
Well, I think this is a really big game for us because I think this is going to be a game that is going to be all about your will and will to sustain, will to win, will to sort of outperform the player that you play against. And to be able to sustain that for 60 minutes in a very difficult environment. And Texas A&M probably has better players and a better team than even their record indicates, and I think they've gotten better every week because they played one of the most difficult schedules of any team so far this year. So This is going to be a very challenging game for us, and it's going to be all about our focus, but at the end of the day, the team that wants it the most is going to have the best chance to be able to sustain it. And what happens on the field, who has the will to block and tackle and do those things and consistently do it for 15 rounds in the fight, to use another boxing analogy that you like, is going to be the one that's going to have the best chance to be successful. And, we have to have enough focus and discipline as players to stay focused on what's happening on the field. I call it what's happening on the green patch. I mean, we can't be worried about the crowd, we can't be worried about the noise, and we can't let those kind of things affect how we play. And hopefully our players will have the maturity to be able to do that.
Coach, thank you. Travel safely. We'll see you in College Station. Brett, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
This is the Crimson Tide Sports Network from Learfield IMG College.